Hello everyone, welcome back to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, dated 10th January 2026. Today again we will be discussing some important topics that has appeared in today's The Hindu and the Indian Express newspapers which are relevant for your examination. In the initial two articles, we have included two mains practice questions which will be useful for your upcoming mains examination. So in the first topic, we'll try to understand what are the major challenges related to the higher education in India and some measures to address the same. After that, in our second topic, we'll try to understand why are the tensions so high in the Arctic region. Then in our simplified section, we'll take up 5 articles and we'll try to explain them in simplest language possible to enrich your understanding of the newspapers. Additionally, we have also incorporated some prelims pointers which is going to be crucial for your upcoming prelims and mains examinations. So have a look on them also and stay tuned. So let's start our discussion with the first topic, that is high quality education needs trust between state and institutions. The context of this topic is that a write-up has appeared discussing various aspects of higher education in India, and this is related to your GS paper 2 education. So the writers are emphasizing on the point. Take the example of China. There also, whatever the consistent economic growth that China witnessed in last one decade, one of the important contributing factor in that was the proper research and development ecosystem that was developed, a proper employability that was provided to the huge population, and that was because of the consistent attention that was given by the state towards education. They helped in ensuring a proper capacity building of the institutions, of the regulatory bodies. A proper hand-holding and support was also provided to the different institutes, which has helped in ensuring that there was a proper education that was imparted to the working age population, which has helped in consistent employability of this population, and also a proper research and development ecosystem that has also been witnessed in China. In last one decade, India has also took various reforms for the research and development, for improvement in the quality of the higher education institutions. For example, let's take the case of the National Education Policy that came in 2020, or Anusandhan National Research Foundation, which is chaired by Honorable Prime Minister of India, to give a proper support to the research and development, and that is also a statutory body that is created by an act of the parliament. Also, with the artificial intelligence impacting every sector, be it education, employment or other parts of the economy, the next decade will be very decisive. For example, we need to integrate and we need to update our curriculum according to the changing needs of the industries, because industries are demanding artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, etc. But our curriculum are not updated according to that. Along with that, the writers are saying that in the upcoming year, there will be 2-3 other things which will be important. For example, there is this Viksit Bharat Shiksha Adhisthan Bill 2025 that will also help us in ensuring that there are certain overlapping mandate between the different institutions. That also we will be able to cater. Then for example, integration of artificial intelligence, that how students can learn, how teachers will design their classrooms, how institutions manage their resources and the administration. All that will be much more efficient, that will be better with the integration of the artificial intelligence. Why? Because let's suppose most of the things that were given in the books, most of the things that were being earlier taught to the students by the teachers, all that is available on the AI models. So why a particular student will prefer to go to the classroom? It is because of a human touch that will be provided in the class. It is because of better pedagogy that the teachers will be following, with the help of which the student can understand the things or the concepts in a better manner. It is because of the real life examples that the teacher will bring in the class, with the help of which the students' learning capabilities or their cognitive development will also improve. Also, that there will be an emphasis on the science and education also, because in the next decade, with the consistent innovation that we are witnessing, the education will not only be limited to the point that it will be providing us a degree or employment, but we also need to innovate, especially in the field of the science and technology, to remain relevant and to also contribute to our economy. Now if we see the state of the higher education in India at this point of time, this is the data from AISHE, that is All India Survey on Higher Education, which is released by Ministry of Education, and that gives the data about the higher education, that says that in India there are 1168 universities, there are around 45,473 colleges, and more than 12,000 stand-alone institutions. And in this, the number of students are around 4.33 crore and 15.9 lakh teachers are there, and the pupil teacher ratio is around 26, which is above the mandated norm of the UGC. Then also if you see the gross enrollment ratio, that is 28.4. Let's suppose there are 100 students who can take the higher education, but only out of them 28.4 are opting for the higher education. Why? Because the rest of the people will have certain employment opportunities, or let's suppose they have certain other compulsions because of which they cannot continue their education, and that is the reason they are leaving the jobs, they are leaving the education, especially the higher education, or they are not opting for the research and development because they need money now. They have got to that level of age where a source of money is more important, a financial security is more important. So the gross enrollment ratio for the higher education institution is 28.5. If you see the gender parity index, how exactly that is calculated, let's suppose this is the GER for the female divided by GER for the male. So that will give us the gender parity index, that what is the participation of women as compared to men members. So the GER of the female is a little bit higher as compared to the gross enrollment ratio of the male members. There are various institutes of the national importance. For example, All India Institute of Medical Science is there, and as of now there are 20 AIMS. Then we have the IITs, IIMs and certain other institutes which are focusing on the specific domains. Also, if you see the changes that has happened after the National Education Policy of 2020. So here, first of all, it provided a guiding framework for reforming Indian higher education. There were various reforms. For example, academic bank of credit is now mandated, that a person can carry forward whatever the credits that they have achieved in any 1 year. Also, multidisciplinary education is now being promoted. For example, earlier if a student was opting for the BSc program, Bachelor of Science, limited options were there with that student. He can take the maths, he can take the biology, either maths or biology, and then physics and chemistry, right? But now a person can opt for BSc maths, and then he can also study certain other humanities subject. So there may be a case that this person was having interest in both maths and history, but earlier curriculum was not allowing this person to take these two subjects. One is from science and humanities. But now with this approach, there will be a multidisciplinary education that will be promoted. Also, flexible degree pathways are now there. For example, there is a 4-year course in the graduation that person can continue, but that person can also opt out of that course after 3 years, and that will also give that person a graduate degree. There is holistic learning through the curriculum and the pedagogical reforms that is being done. For example, there are various platforms like Diksha and Swayam, with the help of which also teacher education is being imparted, so that teacher can also change the way that they teach in the classes, and that also will help in improving the learning capabilities of the students. The main aim is to align higher education with the India's demographic advantage and development aspirations. For example, Economic Survey 2018-19 says that by 2049, around 59% of India's population will be working age population, and we need to ensure that we are reaping that demographic dividend effectively. That can actually help us in ensuring that our economic productivity is increasing, and whatever the targets that we have made, for example, target of becoming a developed country or Viksit Bharat by 2047, that can be achieved. Now let's look into the key issues in India's higher education system. For example, there is faculty shortage and quality gaps. For example, in IITs itself, there is 40% vacancies with regard to the teacher, and in IIMs 31% as per the Ministry of Education data. Also, since in the teaching profession, there are low incentives and pay and career growth, and that is one of the reason why this is one of the career that is not attractive for the majority of the youth population. There is this scheme by the Ministry of Education with the name Pradhan Mantri Madan Mohan Malviya National Mission on Teachers and Training, and that has aimed at improving the teachers' quality, professional development of the teachers, and also to develop a cadre of the educators with the help of which we can fulfill whatever the vacancies are there. But again, it hasn't given us the required outcomes which were intended. Then also there is weak research and development. As per Economic Survey 24-25, India's expenditure on the research and development as percentage of GDP was 0.7% only. But the other issue is that majority of this expenditure is coming from the public sector itself. That more than 50% is coming from the public sector, a very small chunk is coming from the private sector, and higher education institutions are contributing a very low percentage towards the overall expenditure on the research and development. And whatever the research and development they are doing, the quality is also suboptimal. For example, the research papers that are developed, there is plagiarism that is time and again reported. They just copy certain things from other research paper. There is no innovation. The commercial viability of that research is not good. For example, let's suppose there was a research that was done, and with the help of which we are able to develop some commercial product. So we can earn money, we can earn certain amount from that research and development. But these kind of research with that we are not able to do. For example, let's suppose this Kaveri engine, okay, that we were intending to use in jets. The research on this Kaveri engine started in year 1980s, and still we are in 2025 and we could not develop that Kaveri engine. The maximum thrust that this Kaveri engine achieved, it is just suitable to power a drone, and that is the reason that it was allowed to be used in Ghatak drones. For example, India is developing this Tejas Mk1, and that is being developed by HAL, which is a government company, public sector undertaking. Now the engine that is being used in this Tejas Mark 1, that we are taking from one of the US based company named GE Aerospace. And when GE Aerospace is delaying the supply of the engines that will be used in this Tejas Mk1, that is also leading to delay in the delivery of Tejas Mk1 to Indian Air Force. And that has led to shortage in the fleet of the overall aircrafts in Indian Air Force. And also it is giving some kind of strategic advantage to the US companies, because if a company is developing some engine, obviously the control, majority of the control will be with them itself, even after transferring most of the information to the company which is using that engine. So if we could have developed this engine effectively, the research on which we started in 1980s, probably we would not be dependent on the US company at this point of time. So whatever the research and development that is being developed, that is of the poor quality. There are infrastructure deficit. For example, there are lack of resources. There are lack of proper labs where the researches can be done properly. Also, this National Research Foundation, that has also led to limited impact. And that is also visible from the fact, for example, Global Innovation Index, which is released by WIPO. In 2023, India's rank was 40, and it has just improved 2 digits. That, for example, recently released Global Innovation Index 2025, India's rank has improved to 38th only. Also, the low gross enrollment ratio, especially for the population belonging to the rural areas, SC/STs, or the women who are underrepresented. And then also there are affordability barriers and the infrastructure constraints. For example, the availability of these higher education institutions across different states. So there are areas where these institutions are far, and then people find it very difficult to access them. Then affordability barrier, that since a lot of higher education institutions are from private sector where fee are very high, and then it becomes difficult for the rural population and SC/ST women population to afford them. And National Education Policy has made a target that 50% will be the gross enrollment ratio in the higher education sector by the year of 2025. Then weak industry academia linkages that is there. For example, curriculum that is not regularly updated, that is outdated. The demand of industry is Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, big data analytics. Whereas the universities and the colleges are still providing that same curriculum which was earlier there. They are not updating that regularly, and because of which the employability of the graduates are abysmal. For example, as per India Skills Report, the employability of the people in 2024 was only 55%. And there are also limited internships and apprenticeships options during the phase of the graduation itself. So that also doesn't give any kind of practical knowledge to these people. They just know the theoretical knowledge, and that further creates a difficulty for these graduates in future. And then governance and the regulatory issues are there. For example, over centralization, especially with regard to the norms that comes from the UGC, AICTE, etc. There is a top-down approach that is followed, and there is limited consultation that is done regularly from the stakeholders, and institutional autonomy, that the autonomy at the college or the university level, that is also minimal. Then there are various overlapping jurisdiction between UGC and AICT, and there are various controversies with regard to the appointment of the vice chancellors. For example, generally it is witnessed that the chancellors of the state universities are the governor of the state itself in a majority of the states, and VC or the vice chancellor in the state universities are appointed by the governor. So in the states like Kerala and in Bengal, etc., that who will actually control the state university, whether it is the state government or the governor who is being appointed by the center, who is the agent of the center. That was also creating some kind of controversy, and that led to concerns of the federalism. So one of the major federal tension, along with various other issues, like there was issue with regard to the GST compensation cess, use of the central investigative agencies like CBI, ED or NIA in some cases, or the issue of the border jurisdiction, like the jurisdiction of BSF that was extended in states like Punjab and West Bengal. Along with all these issues, this role of the role of the governor in the appointment process of the vice chancellor in the state universities, that was also one of the important federal concern. Then the digital divide, for example, uneven digital access, the consistent supply of the 4G and the 5G connections in the remote areas, in underserved and unserved areas. For example, internet access is only in 34% institutions as per the Ministry of Education, and at least there are 50% of the non-functional computers in the institutes, and that is the reason these students are also not getting the practical knowledge with regard to the new age technologies. Then there are funding constraints and privatization related issues. For example, public spending on the education is around 4 to 4.6% of GDP. Private colleges, around 79% of them are there. And then again, because of this huge contribution of the private sector, affordability further becomes a challenge. Then the quantity over the quality, for example, rapid expansion that we are witnessing, that there are more than 1,000 universities and more than 44,000 colleges. This NAACC also gives accreditation to these colleges based on the curriculum and different components that on which they are performing. So but the major issue is that again the quality. For example, although there are NAAC certificates that are given, UGC, AICTE also regularly inspects these institutions. But again, what we witnessed recently, and that is an exception obviously, that we can say that Al Falah University in Haryana, we saw some kind of connections with the Delhi blast, although that is still in the investigation stage, that is still allegations on the university. But again, some kind of you can say that link that was found, especially from with the doctors that were there, that were employed by the university, although that is still in the investigation stage, that is still only the allegations. But again, when there will be so much of universities and colleges, again it will be very difficult for us to ensure that there is a proper oversight mechanism on these institutes. Also, limited internationalization. For example, recently, although you can say that in the QS ranking of 2026, there are more than 50 institutes which featured. But again, we are not able to attract a huge population in the Indian institutes. And the other issues that you can say for the Indian students who wants to go to certain countries for the study purposes, there again there are visa issues. For example, recently what was witnessed in the case of the US, etc. So that further creates the challenge for the higher education sector. There are certain government initiatives, for example, National Education Policy 2020, that is focusing on the vocational education, that is earning while learning also, multidisciplinary higher education, multiple entry exit system, academic bank of credit. Also the focus is on internationalization. For example, some of the universities are allowed to set up their campuses in India, and focus is on the research and development, but again the quality remains a concern. Rashtriya Uच्चतर Shiksha Abhiyan, that is again focus is on funding and the governance reforms in the state universities, because the majority of the rural areas enrollment is happening in these universities, and infrastructure development, faculty strengthening, accreditation linked support is the focus. Institution of Eminence or IOE scheme, where there are creation of the world class universities are being developed so that we can attract some of the foreign institutions, and there will be focus on enhanced academic, administrative and financial autonomy to these institutes, that they will be able to decide their curriculum, their fee structure, as well as certain other nitty-gritties related to the overall functioning of those institutes. Also, Anusandhan National Research Foundation, which is being chaired by Honorable Prime Minister of India. There will be a competitive research funding, industry academia collaboration, interdisciplinary and mission oriented research will be focused on the Anusandhan National Research Foundation. The focus will be to ensure that whatever the research that is being developed, that can lead to some of the at least minimum viable product. Also, recently Honorable Prime Minister chaired a meeting with certain stakeholders of the artificial intelligence. There also he emphasized on the point that we are not only concerned about making AI toys, but develop such AI modules which can be useful, which can be unique. For example, let's suppose Google came with Gemini, right? OpenAI came with ChatGPT. Then one of the Chinese company came with DeepSeek, right? But you will hardly find that in India there was such kind of large language model which has been so successful or which has been developed. Then SWAM, study webs of active learning for young aspiring minds, where online courses for the graduates, undergraduates and postgraduates level, credit transfer will happen, and the digital access to the quality education is the focus area. Then Study in India program, that is again focusing on internationalization of higher education, attracting foreign students to Indian institutions. Along with that, again there are, for example, PM Swam Prabha channels are there on the televisions, etc., which were also providing the higher education to the unserved and underserved areas. Then also Diksha portal is there, which is again imparting the capacity building to the teachers, etc. So what are the measures to revitalize higher education? First of all, research and innovation. For example, as per Niti Aayog, India's per capita expenditure on research and development, that is very less, that is around $43.41, and in United States it is $1,777 per capita. In China it is $325 per capita. In Russia it is $284 per capita. So in India it is much less. Also, a huge portion of this expenditure per capita, that is coming from the budget, and this budget expenditure that is being done on research and development, that is also going towards certain limited sectors like DRDO for the defense research, or a huge portion is going with ISRO for the space research, and some other agencies like AICMR, etc., are also getting a huge portion from this budget towards research and development. In India, around 56% of the research and development expenditure is being done by the public sector itself, and around 36% is the private sector expenditure. Higher education institutions are spending only around 7%, whereas in US majority of the expenditure on research and development is being done by the private sector and the higher education institution. That is the reason there is need for promoting interdisciplinary research across different sectors, and also research, industry and government clusters needs to be developed, where government will provide a proper support and hand holding, but ultimately honesty or integrity in doing the research and yielding proper result is the responsibility of the institutions who are doing research. Government has came with various reforms that we have discussed: National Research Foundation, Atal Innovation Mission, which is an flagship scheme by the Niti Aayog. Then startup schemes are being also developed with the Stand Up India scheme, Startup India scheme. As of 2026, there are more than 110 unicorns in India having a valuation of more than $1 billion. Also, government came with this Shreyas scheme, under which the higher education scholarships are being provided to the backward classes. Then industry academia collaboration, that we need to co-design the curricula, that we need to consult with the industry effectively to understand their needs, understanding changing demands, and accordingly we need to provide a proper and industry academia collaboration. Also, centers of excellence can be developed, and there can be dedicated centers for the research and development who will be solely focusing, who will be utilizing all their resources for the research purposes itself. Also, mandatory internships should be there while doing the graduation or the higher education, so that these students also have some of kind of practical knowledge. Then professors of practices or Pradhan Mantri Kausal Vikas Yojana universities integration can be done. That Pradhan Mantri Kausal Vikas Yojana is going to impart whatever the skills. For example, 4.0 was providing the skills related to big data analytics and artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, etc. So there can be an integration with some kind of university, that university is imparting education, and then those skills are being refined on these institutes. Then digital and hybrid learning, for example, there can be blended models that can also help us in accessing the or addressing the infrastructure deficit needs as well as the affordability barriers. Virtual labs can be established. Diksha and Swam expansion needs to be done so that the teachers and their pedagogy can be improved. Also, vocational and skill integration, we need to mainstream the vocational education, we need to promote that. Also, certain CSR funds etc. can also be devoted towards imparting vocational education. Apprenticeship, skill linked degrees needs to be provided, and interdisciplinary programs needs to be further promoted, so that a person who is graduating is not only equipped with any one kind of skill, rather that person is also having some other skills along with some lifelong skills, skills like emotional intelligence, communication, etc. Then inclusivity and access, for example, scholarship for the SC, ST, EWS, that needs to be expanded and that needs to be imparted in a time bound manner. Disability friendly infrastructure needs to be there, that there should be a proper accessibility towards classroom, washrooms, etc. Regional language education needs to be also promoted so that these students can access that material in an effective manner. Also, regional equity, we should focus on those unserved and underserved areas where the cross enrollment ratio is very less, with some central or the specialized universities in those areas. The IITs, NITs or other center of excellence can provide mentoring to these institutes so that later they can also become better centers. Then also micro credentials like modular certifications in certain new age skills can also be provided. That will also boost the confidence of these students. Then we need to also culture the soft power, for example, yoga, Ayurveda, Indian knowledge systems like let's suppose other Unani, Siddha, medicines, etc. They also needs to be promoted. There should be proper courses in that, there should be proper skills that needs to be imparted in that, because there is a demand of these Indian traditional knowledge systems in the foreign countries. And also entrepreneurship university should also be there, that only the people who are graduating, only people who are getting the higher education, that motivation should not be only to get the jobs, but motivation should be to become the job creators. So we need to focus on the startup focused institutions. Incubation centers can be developed, some kind of venture capitalist access can be provided, mentoring from some of the founders etc. can be provided at earlier stage itself, so that we can develop that risk taking ability with these students, we can develop that vision with the students, with the help of which they can think of opening any kind of startup in future. And this is a mains practice question that you people can write from this particular topic. Our next topic is geopolitical contestation in Greenland and Arctic region. And this is related to syllabus of your GS paper 2, important international institutions, groupings and agreements involving India and or affecting India's interest, as well as syllabus of your GS paper 3, environmental pollution, degradation and conservation. On Tuesday, the White House said that they are considering various options, including an option of using the military force to acquire Greenland. In response to that, the Italian Prime Minister said that she did not believe that US will use such an option. But a weekend US military operation that seized the leader of Venezuela, that further rekindled the concerns that US might use the force to acquire the Greenland also. So what is the logic why the US intends to acquire the Greenland? It is because that it is rich in critical minerals. Also, with the climate change that is happening, global warming that is happening, when the global temperatures are increasing, that is also leading to melting of the ice. So the regions of the permafrost, which were earlier under the constant ice, they are also melting, and they are generally considered, there are various research that are also done, and they are considered to be rich in critical minerals. And that is the reason that US is having that opinion that if they will acquire that land, with the thawing of the ice that is happening, with the melting of the ice that is happening, the new land that is emerging, which is rich in critical minerals, can also give the strategic advantage to the US. Along with that, this is one of the area which is near the Canada, Russia also. So that also is of the strategic importance. And these are the two major reasons, that accessibility of the critical minerals and the strategic location, because of which the US mainly wants to acquire that Greenland. Now, what is the profile of the Greenland? Its capital is Nuuk, and area is around 21,66,086 square kilometer. Approximate population is 57,000. Their GDP as of 2021 figure is $3.24 billion. GDP per capita is around $57,116. And also we need to understand that it is world's largest island in an autonomous territory of Denmark, and they have the self-rule and its own parliament. But it is an autonomous territory of the Denmark. Now, the second question that should come, that who exactly is ruling Greenland? So, Denmark has controlled the Greenland for over 3 centuries. But in 1979, Greenland attained home rule following a referendum that was done within their population. And there was a 2009 Act of Greenland Self-Government that expanded the Greenland's autonomy, that granted it control over the domestic affairs such as policing, courts and coast guard. However, the Denmark continues to oversee Greenland's foreign policy and the security. For example, they contribute to overall security forces that helps us in managing the borders, etc. and also their relations with other countries that is managed by the Greenland. And why does the US wants Greenland? They have repeatedly raised acquiring Greenland is key to securing the US national security and economic interest. Every move that US takes, always they say that this is very important for the national security and economic interest. They captured the president of Venezuela. The reason for that, they want to control the Venezuela's oil. Venezuela is having the largest proven oil reserves, and oil is one of the important commodity in the world trade. For example, 85% of India's crude oil need is being fulfilled by the import itself. Now, the country who will be controlling oil, obviously they will have a strategic leverage. Greenland, that is located between the Europe and the North America, is US for the US military defense, especially amid rising Chinese and Russian activity in Arctic and North Atlantic. For example, here it is Russia, and then slowly and gradually when China is also expanding their footprint, that US is having that mind, that if US is having that thing in mind, that if they will be having that presence in Greenland, it is not only the economic interest, but if they will have certain bases in that region, that will also give a better response time to US military forces in case of any contingency that might arrive in future. Also, US established a Thule air base during the Cold War, and full control over Greenland would enhance the US air, naval and space operations in the Arctic region, where China and Russia are also increasing their influence. And also, climate change is opening new Arctic trade routes, increasing regions' economic and strategic value, and that will lead to better access to Europe and certain other regions. So that will also reduce the dependency on the historic routes. So the country who will have the control over Greenland will also have the control over these new trade routes that are coming. Also, melting of ice that we were discussing has made the Greenland's mineral resources accessible, and it has caught the eye of the global mining companies as well as the US president. But can US acquire the Greenland? He may see it as a strategic and economic value, but to acquire it, he will have to face legal, political, as well as certain diplomatic barriers. For example, they could legally acquire Greenland, but only with the consent of both Denmark and Greenland's self-ruling parliament, because Denmark is the country that is deciding the foreign policy as well as they are deciding the overall security of the Greenland. And if there is an outright acquisition, that is not possible, but US could pursue a compact of free association with Greenland. Under that arrangement, Greenland would remain self-governing but maintain close ties to US, particularly for the economic assistance and defense. But still, any deal that will be happening from the Greenland will require the approval of both Greenland parliament as well as the Denmark's parliament. And also, they have shown previously interest in Greenland. For example, in 1946, the US president offered $100 million to buy it. Denmark further rejected the offer. Then in 2019, Mr. Donald Trump also gave the proposal, but that was also rewaffled, with Denmark calling that idea is absurd. So the major drivers for this tension in the Arctic region is the resource competition, especially with regard to the new resources that are emerging, that is the critical mineral, and with the rising automobile use, rising use of semiconductors, a huge demand and use in the electronics industries, the critical minerals remains very vital. So the country who will have the accessibility and availability of these critical minerals is going to have a better significant advantage in the global trade in future. Also, there are certain geopolitical rivalries also between Russia and US, and the new rivalry that is emerging, especially with regard to the economic leverage, that which country is having better leverage, the tariff wars that are going on between China and US. So that is also being manifested in some other area, that is the Arctic region. And also military interests are there, that if the country will be having their bases, so obviously they will have better control for their firepower or for their navy, etc. in future, if any kind of war, etc. that will be emerging in future. The Arctic nations are Canada, Denmark, and the Greenland, which is an autonomous area with the parliament, Finland, Iceland, Norway, Russia, Sweden, and US. These are the Arctic nations. Also, there is this Arctic Council that focuses on the environmental protection, research, and indigenous rights under this. For example, and there are territorial claims that are from Canada, Denmark, and Russia, but there are overlapping seabed areas that which country will be having control over their exclusive economic zone, that Arctic comes under in which exclusive economic zone. The military presence, Russia has the largest icebreaker fleet, including a nuclear powered one in this Arctic area. And as of now, the reasons that we have discussed, that since melting of ice is happening, climate change is opening new trade routes. The world global temperatures has already surpassed 1.5 degrees Celsius as compared to pre-industrial levels, and that is opening new trade routes and resource access. There are untapped resources also of oil, gas, rare earth elements like phosphates, copper, and fishing grounds. Then there are legal framework also that govern the UN clause, that for example that says that up to which nautical mile a particular country can access particular resource. And unlike demilitarized Antarctic zone, there is presence of the military also in this area, and that further creates certain tensions for this region. And with overlapping maritime claims and military posturing that keeps on happening in these regions, there is further that tensions that are rising in this area. Now here you can see that these are the Arctic Council members: US, Russia, Norway, Denmark, Canada, Sweden, Finland, and Iceland. These are majorly the Arctic countries, and there are certain permanent observers also, and India is also having the permanent observer status in the Arctic Council. And since it is also having the resource wealth, for example 13% of undiscovered oil, 30% of untapped natural gas is expected or presumed to be found in this region. Rare earth elements, Greenland's deposit attracts the global investment. Rare earth elements are the group of 17 elements whose importance is critical in high technology. Their use has exploded the electronics and renewable technologies, for example in making photovoltaic solar modules for the solar panels, etc. That these elements are very important. And as of now, China that tops the list of the reserves and mine production. Then we have the Vietnam, but mining and extracting that is a major challenge, right? Then also we have the trade route, for example Northeast Passage, that could reduce the Asia Europe shipping distance by around 8,000 kilometers. So any country that will have the access of this area will also have the control over these trade routes. And these rare earth metals are used across different industries. For example, they are used as catalysts, and they are also used in magnets, electronics, they are used in metal alloys, ceramics, and also they are used in electronic industries for making the screens, etc. And which product actually require rare earth elements as the raw materials? For example, superconductors, refining catalysts, cell phones, windmills, hybrid components, electronic polymers, and high flux rare earth magnets. All these requires rare earth elements. In India, monazite is one of the main rare earth element that is found in India, but it contains radioactive thorium which cannot be stored, and so monazite is not mined in India. Ministry of Mines believes that there are rare earth elements that are found in Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, and they have the low thorium content, and they can be extracted and they can be industrially used. And China is the largest producer of world's rare earth element, and that is the reason there is a dependency on China. And to reduce that dependency, India started signing various agreements. For example, India signed one agreement with Chile. We also signed ICT with US to further improve the access of the critical minerals, etc. So what is the path ahead, or what is the road ahead? First of all, we need to strengthen the international cooperation. We need to empower the Arctic Council. There can be a multilateral binding treaty that can come on the lines of the Antarctic Treaty, and that can also provide conflict resolution mechanisms. For example, Antarctic Treaty says that there should not be any military use. There should be freedom of scientific investigation. For example, India established its first research station with the name of Dakshin Gangotri in 1983 itself, and that was decommissioned recently. Then we have the Matri research station, we have the Bharati research station in Antarctic, and that helps in scientific investigation, and that tells us an idea about the overall ecology of that region and the impact of climate change. Also, there should be free exchange of scientific plans and data with the other countries so that the resources can be utilized at an optimal level. Also, there should not be any territorial claim. All that should be put on hold. Also, this zone should be completely nuclear free. There should not be any nuclear installations, etc., or other submarines, etc., can be used in these regions. Also, it applies to land but not to seas. All stations open to inspection by other nations to get an idea whether all these components are being fulfilled properly or not. Along with that, other reasons, for example, national laws apply to citizens, not to areas. Treaty may be modified at the time, and they requires unanimous agreements of the treaty nations, all treaty nations, to ensure that no one carries out acts against the treaty. And then we have the sustainable resource extraction. For example, transparent resource management. There should be an objective criteria that at what level the resources can be extracted, and then that should also serve the benefit of whole community rather than limited to any one country. Also, military transparency and confidence, that there should be confidence building measure, demilitarization zones that needs to be built in those regions, and that can also help us in subsidizing the conflict and tensions in those regions. Also, there should be sustainable trade and shipping, because with the help of that we can have the safe Arctic shipping, and all global shipping standards needs to be followed. All the norms related to the pollutions and the ships, etc., who can access that region, that needs to be specifically followed. Shipping safety protocols needs to be followed. Scientific research and monitoring, for example, there should be international research collaborations, etc., can happen. Global monitoring systems can be developed so that whatever the melting that is happening, that can be reduced. Plus we can also achieve whatever the targets that we have earlier made to limit the overall global temperature growth. Also, there needs to be we need to have the global diplomacy and conflict preventions, diplomatic dialogue platforms, conflict prevention strategy needs to be there. For example, whatever platforms are there, for example, there is NATO. So NATO was created in 1949 to ensure collective security of its member, and it is based on the principle that attack on any one member is attack on all, which is said by Article 5 of this NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So these kind of platform needs to be properly leveraged. They should discuss that these areas should be demilitarized. There should not be any conflict that should happen in these zones, because that can lead to an overall impact on the ecology of that region also. And this is a mains practice question that you people can write from this particular topic. Moving towards our simplified section, first topic is de-dollarization fear. This is related to your GS paper 2, effect of policies and politics of countries on India's interest, monetary policy and liberalization, which is related to your syllabus of GS paper 3. And this has appeared in today's The Hindu, page number 6. So what we witnessed after World War II, that the dollar was one of the currency in which most of the trade was happening. But after Russia-Ukraine was started, and after that when Russian crude oil was available at cheap prices as compared to the prices which was being offered by other oil producing countries, then many countries, for example India, China, they started buying that Russian oil in the currencies, other currencies, not in the dollars. So that was the phenomena that was showing the de-dollarization. So that refers to the process of reducing the dominance of US dollars in trade, finance and other foreign exchange reserves. And it involves substituting the US dollar with other currencies or assets. For example, India can say, instead of paying in US dollar, I can pay you in gold. So that majority of the trade, if that will happen, or majority of the international transaction, if we will start doing in the currency other than dollar, that phenomena is called as the de-dollarization. But what we witnessed that, for example, the Venezuela's leader was when captured. Now US is the de facto controlling the Venezuelan oil, and Venezuela is having the largest proven oil reserves. So when US will have greater control over oil, whatever the oil that they will be selling, they will only be accepting the payments in the dollar. So that will further strengthen the position of dollar. So that is what we were witnessing, that President Donald Trump's urgency to push Russia sanctions bill through the Congress, granting him the power to impose tariffs up to 500% on nations buying oil from Russia. So now if there will be such high tariff, so there may be a case that the countries will stop buying oil from Russia, and again that will strengthen the position of dollar. Similarly, whatever in last few weeks what happened, for example, the capture of Venezuela President Nicolas Maduro, and also Trump emphasized that Venezuela's vast oil reserves as America's underlying strategic interest. Then along with the Russia sanctions, when the Venezuela's oil is being controlled by the US, now they will start demanding payments only in the dollar terms. Plus, countries will also stop taking oil, accepting oil or trading in other currencies other than dollars. And also we were witnessing that China's were pursuing even larger instances. For example, they were securing energy at discount, and they were also experimenting with non-dollar settlement mechanisms. For example, they were using yuan in energy trade, and that has significantly enhanced the internationalization of the renminbi. Then India has also reportedly begun paying for some crude in yuan, signaling small but telling shifts in how global energy commerce is conducted. So as of now, it is not when whatever the crisis that we were witnessing, whatever tensions that we are witnessing, here only trade or oil or certain tensions are not at stake, but it is then architecture of global trade and finance at the moment of the historic transition that we are witnessing. Also, what we need to understand that when there was a complete dependency on dollar, so consistent supply and availability in the foreign exchange, that was also one of the concern, and that was one of the reason why countries were shifting to other currencies. So de-dollarization is reducing reliance on US dollar in trade, finance and reserves. For example, let's suppose IMF is, let's suppose they are extending certain loans. So in most of the cases, they will be extending that loan in dollar itself. And why this matters? Because this provides the geopolitical safety. Let's suppose US will sanction some country, so they will not have the access or availability of the dollar. So trade might compromise in that case. But other country, if they are trading in some other currency, so that sanction will have limited impact. That will also lead to diversification across different countries, across different currencies. That will also provide currency sovereignty, that country will have a greater control over the supply, over the demand of that currency, and also that will have limited impact if any other country, if the US is changing their policy stance. Also, that provides policy insulation, gold revival, as well as digital push. There are various initiatives that were taken to actually focus on this idea of the de-dollarization. For example, there is this M-Bridge project, which is a digital cross-border payment system using the central bank digital currencies, and it was initially promoted by the central bank of several countries like China, Thailand, and there was a support from BIS, that is Bank of International Settlements. Then there is BRICS Plus system that bridges a clear and proposed financial system for setting up of the payment and clearing systems among the BRICS countries. There can be some mechanism that BRICS countries can follow for the trade and settlement between these countries. Then there is Petro Yuan, that is Shanghai's energy exchange, handles around 10.5% of global oil trade and 14.4% of global oil futures, which are the derivatives. So Saudi Arabia and UAE's non-dollar oil trades will boost the Petro Yuan by increasing the demand and enhancing its credibility as a stable alternative to US dollar. Then we have the BRICS currency. At the 16th Kazan BRICS summit in 2024, an agreement in principle was reached to use a new settlement currency that will be called as unit, and that will be backed by 40% gold and 60% local currencies of the BRICS member countries. Our next topic is Center Chairs meeting to support pathway for Samagra Shiksha 3.0. This is related to GS paper 2 education, and this has appeared in today's The Hindu, page number 9. So Union Education Minister chaired a meeting and with the representatives of the state government and experts on the next phase of Center's Samagra Shiksha school education program. Also, he said that this meeting was co-chaired by Skill Development Minister, and there was also discussion focused on best practices, emerging challenges, and priority interventions needed to strengthen the school governance, infrastructure, teacher training, and student entitlement. Also, Mr. Pradhan, who is the Education Minister, he said that Prime Minister's vision for Viksit Bharat by 2047 can be achieved only when every child in India has access to quality education and the country achieves a 100% school enrollment up to class 12th. Also, if you see this Samagra Shiksha, the objective of that is to provide quality education, enhance learning outcomes, and bridge social and gender gaps are there. Whatever the gaps are there between the enrollment ratio of males and females. Also, whatever the gender gaps are, whatever the enrollment gaps are between the students of different hierarchy, be it based on the caste, be it based on the class, or be it based on the accessibility of the economic resources. Also, it will ensure equity and inclusion, maintain the minimum schooling standards. For example, the minimum standards that there should be proper infrastructure building, that building should support a proper cooling environment, etc. There should be proper electricity supply, there should be proper toilet facilities with separate girls and boys toilet. Then also they will promote vocational education, support Right to Education Act implementation, and also they will strengthen several institutes who will provide teacher training, and that will also be in line with the SDG 4.1 and SDG 4.1, which we are targeting to achieve by 2030. 30. And this ministry is this scheme is under Ministry of Education, and it is a centrally sponsored scheme. There are various interventions under this, for example, universal access, infrastructure development, retention strategies of the students, that student needs to be retained, there should be less dropout, gender and equity, for example, enhanced focus on girls education, inclusive education, for example, special provisions for marginalized groups, quality enhancement, for example, strengthening teacher education institutions, that whatever the institutions are there, there should be regular training that needs to be provided. Whatever the teachers who are providing education at these teacher education institutions, they should also be updating themselves with the recent changing pattern and better pedagogy. Then also vocational education, for example, integrated skill based learning for class 9 to 12th, digital education, for example, implementation of operation digital board and other ICT initiatives, various Swachhata initiatives like specific provisions for Swachhata activities under Swachh Vidyalaya, teacher training, strengthening SCRTs and diets as the nodal teacher training centers. Our next topic is gold ETFs score over equities in December. This is related to your GS paper 3 capital market, and this has appeared in today's the Hindu page number 11. So let's suppose all of us, when we have savings, so we invest in various assets or various instruments. For example, either we can invest in stock market, which is also called as, let's suppose, capital market. Okay, we can also invest in bonds, which is called as debt market. Okay, we can also invest in various other options that are available in banks like term deposits, etc. Or we can also invest in mutual funds. We can also invest in ETFs. What is the difference between mutual fund and ETFs? We will be discussing this. Also, ETF in simple term is the exchange traded funds that invest in physical gold and lets you buy or sell gold like a stock without holding it physically. For example, let's suppose you have 1.5 lakh rupees. Okay, and you want to buy, let's suppose, 10 gram of gold. So you'll have to first of all go to the jewelry shop and you'll have to buy that 10 gram gold. Then again there will be a safety concern that whether that will remain safe at our homes or not. So instead of buying that from the jewelry shop, we can buy a gold ETF, and which is a marketable security that is backed by physical gold. Whatever the changes will be there in the prices of gold, that will also reflect in the prices of ETFs. So ETFs are also like a stock that we can trade that during a day, and it is diversified, it is low cost way to invest, and it is like a managed fund also. For example, whatever there is Bharat 22 ETF. So there are different companies which are kept under this ETF. So instead of buying any one stock of any one company, when you buy one ETF of Bharat 22, in a way you are investing in different companies which are kept under this Bharat 22 ETF. And whatever the gain or lose you will witness in Bharat 22 ETF, that will be cumulative of all the companies which are kept under that Bharat 22 ETF. And what are the companies that will be kept under Bharat 22? What is the weight that will be assigned to them? All that is decided by a proper managed fund who do have a proper experience of investing, and they do have the experience in managing all the funds properly. Similarly, we have the mutual funds where there are different investors from whom we will pool money, and there will be a mutual fund manager also who will be investing in different stocks or certain other instruments. If majority of the investment is happening in the stocks or the equity, that will be called as the equity mutual fund. If they will be investing in debt, so that can be called as debt mutual fund, and if they are investing in both, so that will be called as a hybrid mutual fund. And whatever the return that they will be generating based on their investment, they will pass on that to the actual investors, and they will keep certain amount with themselves as the mutual fund manager. It is affordable, it is diversified across different sectors, across different companies, and that helps in ensuring that risk remains minimal. Also, it is professionally well managed by a fund manager who do have a greater experience in investing, and it is also well regulated by SEBI. Now, the only difference between mutual fund, some of the difference between exchange traded fund and mutual fund is that ETF can be bought and sold between market hours 9:15 to 3:30, whereas mutual fund, generally you see that whatever the change in the value of the net asset value of your mutual fund will be there, that you will witness in one time, that you will witness during a day only once. Also, what are the news item, what the news item is saying, that mutual fund investment chose gold ETF or exchange traded funds over equity oriented schemes in December 2025 following the rally in the gold and suboptimal returns. So what we are witnessing, that net inflows in gold ETFs, a mutual fund investment avenues that is relatively in the nascent stage, tripled from the month earlier, and this is the record high net flow into gold ETFs. So here whatever the mutual funds are there, instead of again investing in equity or the stocks of the company, they are also investing in the gold ETFs, right? So and all this data is related to that itself, that in the stocks there is general decline or equity that we are witnessing, and gold ETF we are witnessing an higher trend that people are investing. Even mutual funds are also, that these fund managers are also investing in those gold ETFs. Next topic is, in missile tech milestone, Scramjet Combustors achieve the run time of over 12 minutes, and this is related to your GS paper 3, achievements of Indians in science and technology, and this has appeared in today's The Indian Express page number 8. So the DRDO has successfully conducted an extensive long duration ground test of actively cooled Scramjet full scale combustor at the state of art Scramjet Connect pipe test facility, and the trial achieved a run time of over 12 minutes, and this has marked a path breaking milestone in the development of hypersonic missile technology. So hypersonic means traveling at a speed of 5 times that is faster than the speed of sound, that is also called as Mach 5 or more. So any missile which is going to achieve the speed of Mach 5 or more, that will be called as the hypersonic missile, and this is crucial at the time of intense global race to master the hypersonic capability. And this test was conducted by Defense Research and Development Laboratory, and the DRDO is responsible for the design and development of this state-of-art missile system and technology. This significant achievement builds up upon the earlier sub-scale test that was conducted April 25 last year, and also this hypersonic cruise missile is capable of exceeding 5 times the speed of sound or over 6100 km/h for an extended period. Now let's see what is the difference between turbojet, ramjet and scramjet. So turbojet uses the compressor blades, and the speed range for this turbojet is that it is subsonic to supersonic. There are moving parts in these turbojets, and generally the oxidizer that will help us in combustion, that is atmospheric air in this turbojet. And then there are moving parts in this turbojet, turbine are there, compressors are there, and the ignition that is generally self-sustaining, that it requires sparks or the fuel mix initially, and it is applied in fighter jets and airlines. Then we have the ramjet, where there are no moving parts like compressors or turbines that is visible in ramjet, and it achieves a speed of Mach 3 to 6, which is also called as supersonic speed. And here also the oxidizer is atmospheric air, there are no moving parts that are present, and it requires high speed air intake for the ignition. And then you can see that this is the compression stage, this is the combustion, and this is the expansion stage, and it is used in missile or some of the unmanned aerial vehicles. Then we have the scramjet engine, where we use shock waves, there are no moving parts, again with the help of which we are able to achieve the hypersonic speed or speed 5 times faster than the speed of sound, that is Mach 5 or more. Here again the oxidizer is atmospheric air, there are no moving parts, and this further needs supersonic airflow for the combustion, and it is used in hypersonic missiles. Our next topic is that Union Home Minister launches data based on bomb blasts in India. This is related to your GS paper 2, government policies and interventions, and this has appeared in today's The Hindu page number 10. So the Union Home Minister inaugurated National Improvised Explosive Device Data Management, which is a first of its kind platform that contains the details of every bomb blast that has occurred in the country since 1999. And it would provide extremely important information related to investigation, etc., that will happen in future. And also with all these data sources, and we will be able to develop advanced artificial intelligence based software for the analysis at the later part of the time, that what is the pattern, what is the raw material that is being used for making that IED, what is the pattern or the sharpness, etc., that they are using in this. And the headquarters is located at the National Security Guards garrison in Manesar, Haryana, and the NSG is the primary force for conducting post-blast analysis in India. And also IED incident that occurred recently also near Red Fort. So with a dedicated data related to all the IED accidents or all the IED related attacks that happened in India, blasts that happened in India, be it by the terrorist organizations or be it by the Naxalites, it will be very crucial in ensuring that there is a proper analysis that we are able to do. So these IEDs is an improvised explosive weapon that is assembled from the civilian, commercial or the military components, and that is designed to destroy, injure or disrupt or create fear, to commonly used in the asymmetric warfare. Asymmetric warfare means, for example, Naxalites are using that against the police forces, against the security forces, and there are different components that are used, and materials, for example, raw materials can be extracted from fertilizers also. So that is the reason you see that from Faridabad there was a huge cache of explosives, raw materials that was confiscated by the security forces, and it was alleged that they were intending to use that for making different kind of improvised explosive devices or IEDs. These are low cost, high impact, and they can be easily concealed also, and it is also little difficult to detect them, and that is the reason we see that in the case of asymmetric warfare they are highly used. That is all from today's analyst. Thank you very much. All the very best. Keep studying.